So it's been a little over a month since the release of the Nintendo Switch 2, as well as the launch title being Mario Kart World. So I figured, we could do a little video just kind of giving my overall impressions with the console, as well as Mario Kart at this point in time. I've been meaning to make a video like this sooner, but I've just not really gotten around to it until now. So I'm sure lots of other YouTubers, I've already seen their thumbnails pop up in my recommendations, where they give their impressions on the Switch 2 as well as Mario Kart. So, what I have to say, I've not necessarily been watching a lot of those videos myself, but, I may very well be echoing the sentiments of a lot of other people. I don't know. Hopefully, there will still be something original here that, isn't the same thing that's been discussed already ad nauseum by other people. But anyway, let's get right into it. So I think the first thing I want to talk about is the system itself, and then after we've talked about the Switch 2 and all of the the hardware features and specs and stuff there, then we will move on to Mario Kart. But yeah, I've got my Switch 2 sitting right here, and as with Mario Kart itself, there's things I like about it, and there's things that are a bit of a step back from what came before. So I have very somewhat mixed feelings on both, to be honest. My feelings are more what's the word I'm looking for? Not as pleasant about Mario Kart World, but we'll get to that. I am more positive about the Switch 2. A lot of the Switch 2 is just it's not wowed me yet, but that doesn't mean that it won't. I'm still very excited about the potential of this console. Part of it, frankly, is the fact that I think that Mario Kart World has been kind of a lackluster launch game to really show off the new console. But I think as more and more games start coming out, like I'm recording this before the release of Donkey Kong Bonanza. By the time this podcast comes out, that game should already be out. But that's one that I think is going to be great. I think the new Splatoon game looks great. Splatoon Raiders, I believe it's called. Metroid Prime 4, I'm sure is going to be great. And, you got Pokemon Legends ZA coming out, Kirby Air Riders. A lot of stuff to look forward to. And honestly, I think this is going to be a very packed first year for the console. Technically, some of these are also Switch 1 games, but I don't really think it matters that much, considering that the Switch 2 is backwards compatible. I mean, it may as well be a Switch 2 game. Like, what difference does it really make at the end of the day? Because we've got, Rhythm Heaven and Tomodachi Life coming out next year, hopefully early in the year. I'm assuming those are maybe going to be Q1 games. We don't know that for sure, but if so, I think all that together makes for a really amazing first year for the Switch 2. So I'm very excited about the potential, about what the Switch 2 can do for me in the future. As of right now, it's a little bit more lukewarm, but that's okay. I mean, it just launched, so that's, I think, to an extent to be expected. But let's get into the things that I maybe don't love about the console that I feel like are a little bit of a step back. So obviously the console is bigger, and with that comes a little bit of extra weight too. This thing is definitely a little heavier in the hands, and I didn't think that would really be much of an issue for me. I've never had an issue with that with any other handheld. But to be honest, when I am playing the Switch 2 in handheld mode for extended periods of time, my arms do legitimately get tired sometimes, and I actually do have to like put it down and like rest my arms a little bit, or like I can feel like my fingers going numb and like falling asleep. That's never been an issue with any other system. The system probably has to be bigger and a little bit heavier to feel like I'm no tech expert, but with this thing being, from what I've heard, more powerful than the Steam Deck and everything, I have to imagine there's a lot going on under the hood. They've probably got a lot of, chips and complicated parts and stuff at work under the hood. So I'm sure that's the reason that it's bigger, and not just because like, oh, we wanted to do like a 3DS to 3DS XL thing, for quality of life, for ease of use, make a bigger screen. Because at this point, I feel like it doesn't really matter that much. I thought the Switch OLED screen was already plenty big enough, and if you were playing a game in handheld mode that was maybe there was some text that was a little bit smaller, you just hold it a little bit closer to your face. So I feel like we've already reached kind of the maximum threshold there of like what's a comfortable display. Well, with a caveat, I'll take that back and say I will say that the extra screen size does make. I've not really done it myself yet, but I can imagine that if you were to gather other people around and play tabletop mode, tabletop, that was like something I hardly ever did with my Switch 1. But with this being so much larger, I could see it actually being somewhat comfortable and working as a decent substitute for a TV to have, like, other people crowd around it if you're playing like split screen Mario Kart or something, for example. So, I take back what I said about the extra screen size being worthless. I do think if you're playing handheld, it doesn't make a huge difference. And it's not like a negative to me, really. Like, yeah, it makes it a little bit more inconvenient for carrying. It's not as, compact, but neither was the Switch 1, if I'm being honest. You couldn't really put that thing in your pocket and walk around with it the same way that you could a 3DS. Not very comfortably, anyway. I've seen people like take apart the Joy-Cons and put the Joy-Con in one pocket and the Switch in the other pocket, but I feel like you would just risk scratching it up and stuff, so I never did that with the Switch 1. So the fact that this thing is not as compact, that's not really a deal breaker for me. But I do hate that it's a little bit heavier. Because, again, that's not the biggest issue in the world, I don't guess. But, you are definitely going to, I think, have to kind of rest your arms and maybe kind of, move them around a little bit if you're playing this thing for an extended period of time. So that's not the biggest negative that I have, but we'll get into one that is a little bit more of a bigger deal for me. And that's the display. The fact that this is not an OLED screen. The Switch OLED, I thought, just looked gorgeous. The colors were just so vibrant, just so rich and deep, And with the Switch OLED, with the Switch 2, it's not an OLED, it's just an LCD screen. And people kept saying, like, oh, LCD screen technology has gotten a whole lot better over the years since, like, the Switch 1 released. The colors on a LCD look pretty much as good now. I don't necessarily think that's true, or if it is, that's not the case with whatever screen they're using in the Switch 2. Now, initially, when I first unboxed it, if you go back and watch my unboxing video, I kind of looked at the home menu screens on both systems and kind of said, yeah, this actually looks pretty comparable. But the more I play it, the more I do feel like, yeah, the colors on this just aren't as vibrant, like in Mario Kart or whatever else I'm playing, as when I pop this bad boy into the dock and play it on the TV. So that's kind of unfortunate. Something that I thought about that occurred to me the other day, maybe there's reasons why this isn't a good idea, but I thought it was kind of an interesting thought that occurred to me. So obviously Nintendo didn't want to have like multiple SKUs on store shelves, right? Because they didn't want people to be confused. Because I don't know, the Wii U's launch had a myriad of problems, so I'm not going to say that was necessarily one of the reasons it flopped. But they launched the Wii U with 2 SKUs, on shelves in stores. There was like the white Wii U, and then there was the Wii U Deluxe version that was like $50 extra. I think the one was $250 and the other was $300 respectively. And the Deluxe one had like, I think more. It had like twice as much internal storage, and I think it might have had like Nintendo Land packaged in with it or something like that and stuff. But I feel like Nintendo, maybe especially considering the flop of the Wii U, was just kind of scared about doing 2 SKUs at launch. But I got to thinking, and what I thought was, so the Steam Deck, they don't actually sell that in stores. Like, it's not available for retail purchase. That's a system that they kind of like know their audience, and it's more for like the hardcore gamer, not necessarily for like casual people. The casual person is maybe not looking necessarily for like a handheld PC, so you can only buy those online on like the Steam website or whatever. So I got to thinking, Nintendo has a website. They have a My Nintendo website that you can order things from that's exclusively available on there, like the the wireless GameCube controller for Switch Online that works for the GameCube games, as well as the Nintendo 64, Super Nintendo, NES controllers, all that. So I just got to thinking, like, what if they had the quote-unquote casual SKU that's available in stores? It's like the regular Switch 2, but exclusively on their website for the hardcore gamer that's in the know, that really cares about, having an OLED screen and would be willing to pay extra. Sell it exclusively on there. Because if they're a hardcore gamer that really cares that much about it, then they're going to know that that's available on the website. They're going to do their research about it. They're going to see the ads and stuff. But it's not going to be on store shelves to confuse people who just want to Switch 2 and aren't going to be like, well, which of these Switch 2s do I get? Maybe I'll come back and I'll think about it, But I get why maybe Nintendo, obviously, they did a very, very good job, to commend them. as far as having enough consoles in stock. I think they did a great job combating scalpers and making sure that this thing was available for people to get their hands on. I don't know how easy they are to come by now necessarily. I'm not sure, but the initial launch, I mean, like, you could go into stores the next day and they would still have, units available beyond just pre-orders that people had, and you could pick one up in the store without a pre-order. So that's pretty awesome. I think Nintendo maybe set a new precedent if they can keep doing that for future hardware, and if Sony and Microsoft can follow suit. But with that said, maybe it wouldn't have been as smooth of a launch if they did have the two SKUs like that with one available online, because that means that they would have had to have delegated some of their manufacturing efforts to this other version, which would probably mean that stores would be getting less. So I can see why maybe that might not have been the best idea, but it does kind of suck knowing that, like, you pay $500+ for this console, depending on what version you get, and in a few years they're probably just going to come out with a better version that's going to cost you even more. So now if you want an OLED version of the Switch 2, you're out $1,000. You can trade in your original at GameStop or somewhere, but you're not going to get as much out of it as you paid for. But so that's also a little disappointing. And one of the bigger things for me, and I've talked about this before as being a gripe before the console came out, this was a big issue for me, and it still is something that I'm kind of upset about, is the fact that it doesn't support just the regular micro SD cards, that you have to have this new Express micro SD card. Because just to kind of go into a little bit of a tangent, a little bit of a rant, my Switch 1, I've got maybe like around 500 gigabytes worth of games downloaded on it. And I've had to upgrade to a bigger micro SD card so many times. So I ended up biting the bullet. It's probably a year or so ago. And I was like, I'm just going to buy the biggest one available on the market. It's 1.5 terabytes. That's like 3 times as much storage on there as games that I currently have. So every game that I currently have on my Switch, I'll be able to download that many more games 2 more times, essentially. So this is future proofing me. This will last me for years to come. I don't remember how much it cost, if it was like $200 or what it was for that 1.5 terabyte SD card. And now it's just kind of redundant because it doesn't work on the Switch 2, which sucks. And so now the biggest Express micro SD card available, which is also $200, is 1 terabyte, which is less than the one that I had for my Switch 1. So I'm going to have to fork out another $200 to have an SD card, a micro SD card with less storage on it than the one that I already had. So that's frustrating. And on top of that, you can't even find them because it's like I guess a brand new thing that just recently came into existence. So they're like sold out everywhere because the Switch 2 was announced and people started buying them up, and then like there's just not been that many manufactured, I guess, by SanDisk or whatever other company, because we're at such a new technology. I'm hoping that maybe by Christmas time or something, when a lot of people will be getting Switch 2s, that maybe there will be a big wave of manufacturing a lot more. Maybe by then they'll have like a 1.5 gig or sorry, not 1.5 gig, but 1.5 terabyte or 2 terabyte option available. But we'll just have to wait and see. Have I been saying gigabyte instead of terabyte this whole time? If so, that's really embarrassing. But yeah, that's super frustrating, and I really hate that. So like I'm constantly having to archive games on my Switch 2 to make room to download something else, and it's so cumbersome. I really like just having all that there from the get-go. Just click a game and just play it immediately whenever I want to. And I guess the reason that the Switch 2 isn't compatible with those other micro SD cards is because the reason it's called an Express micro SD card is because it can load data significantly faster. I think maybe like 5 times faster or something. But it's like, okay, well, like, yeah, but why can't you still use the old one? Like, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's more that goes into it than I'm thinking, because it's like, maybe it's not just the initial boot up, like, oh, it's going to take 5 times longer to get into Breath of the Wild or something, if I have it downloaded on my micro SD card compared to, loading with the Express micro SD card. Or like, what if I'm teleporting somewhere and that takes 5 times longer? Because I would just say like, oh, well, it's it's worth it. That's fine. You know, I'll wait the extra time if my old micro SD card that I paid all that money for still works, and I can still have all my games. At the very least, it would be, you know, it would be serviceable until I can get the express card. But maybe it just means loading assets, like, you know, obviously if you're playing like an open world game, not all that's rendered in at once. So maybe games like that where it's like, you know, to render in trees off into a distant, maybe it's not just the initial boot up, maybe it's deeper than that, and so some games will just be unplayable with that card, or some things wouldn't spawn correctly or as quickly as they're supposed to. I don't know, maybe that's the issue, and if that's the case, then I get it. So I don't know, but either way though, it is really frustrating. It is annoying. um, Outside of that, that's probably most of my issues with the actual like hardware itself. No, actually, I take that back. So and maybe this is just a me problem. Maybe nobody else has had this issue. Um, I do not love the ZL and ZR buttons, the triggers on the back of the Joy Cons. There's just like not a lot of space in between them to press really. And I kind of went back and felt, and it kind of feels similar on the Switch One Joy Cons, but like I don't know. It's like I feel like it's not that responsive. Again, maybe this is just me. I don't know. But like when I'm playing Mario Kart, for example, when I'm drifting around a corner, like sometimes like I'll still be holding the button in, but my character will just stop drifting, and it'll really mess up my, you know, me cutting that corner, taking that curve. So yeah, I don't know. Like obviously I know that these aren't like analog sticks, you know, like the GameCube controller, or I think the PlayStation DualSense is like that, where you can like press it at different increments, like press it in a little bit or press it in a lot. But I still feel like there should be a little bit more. Like I feel like you can hardly call these trigger buttons because it's really not like pulling a trigger. It's just kind of just pushing a button, if that makes sense. Probably the best thing I can compare it to, and it's not as bad, but it kind of reminds me of like on the new 3DS, how they've got this little nub here that's for like camera control and stuff. Like I feel like when I play with this, I can be like manhandling this nub, and it just doesn't feel that responsive. Like it's just not turning the camera like I want it to. And to a lesser extent, not nearly as bad as that little nub on the 3DS, but to a lesser extent, that's kind of the vibe I'm getting from these ZL and ZR buttons, where it's like it's so like you can only press it in such a limited way that it makes it where I feel like it's not always being perfectly responsive. And again, maybe that's just me. I don't know. Maybe I've got a faulty ZR button. I've been saying ZL and ZR, but when I'm playing Mario Kart, I drift with this one. So I don't know. Maybe this one wouldn't mess me up as bad. But that's kind of been my experience. A couple minor nitpick things about the console that are really even hardly worth bringing up. I feel like maybe the kickstand was a little bit better on the OLED. It wasn't just this kind of like, you know, thin piece of plastic that goes around in kind of an archway. It was actually like solid in the middle here. Better than the Switch One's original kickstand, like the OG model. But I mean, it still gets the job done. It's still pretty nice, you know, just whatever angle you want it at. So it's kind of a non-issue. And another very, very small complaint, I guess, is I think it's a little bit unfortunate that, as with the Switch OLED, that the dock itself only has the two the USB-C ports. The Switch One had three, I believe, but then with the OLED model Switch One, they took out one of them and replaced it with like a wired like Ethernet cord, which I believe is the case for this one as well. But yeah, I kind of miss having the three. I feel like three, kind of like at minimum, would be nice. Ideally, maybe even more, maybe four. But I don't know, because like, you know, if you're using, for example, you know, the GameCube controller adapter, like for Smash Brothers and stuff, where you can use like your old wired GameCube controllers. That thing has to be plugged into two USB-Cs simultaneously. So if you have that plugged in, there's no room to plug in, like, say, the charger for your wireless controllers, or to plug in the cord for your wired ones. And if all you have is wired controllers, because they are cheaper, so I'm sure there's probably some families out there that do just get the wired ones if they need extra controllers. There's only enough slots for two of them, so you can't play four player like that with all four people plugged into the console. So it would have been nice if there were three or four USB-C ports on there, but as it is, there's just the two, which is serviceable. And again, both of those are kind of like not major issues, but just kind of little things that's like, yeah, that could have been a little bit nicer. But really, the biggest things to me, um, the the Express SD card thing is very annoying, but obviously once I get an Express SD card, I mean that's going to have me out more money, but then I'll be able to hold all my games, so it won't be an issue at that point. It's just kind of the principle of it, I guess, just kind of leaves a sour taste in your mouth. But something that I can't just, pay a little bit of money to upgrade is the fact that it doesn't have a OLED screen, which is mildly disappointing. One other very, very big negative that I don't know how I forgot to bring this one up. The battery is not amazing. So with the Switch 1, with the OLED model in particular, I never really had to worry about charging it. It pretty much constantly stayed charged. I hardly ever had like the low battery warning come on, because like when I'm not playing it, I put it in the dock, and so it's going to be fully charged next time I'm raring to go to play the game some more. But yeah, out of the OLED, I feel like 3 hours is maybe like the minimum. I honestly feel like most of the time the OLED would probably last me like 5 hours or more. I don't know. Like I feel like I got really, really good battery life out of the OLED. The original Switch, maybe about 3 hours, something like that. The Switch 2 is kind of, I think, lower than the original Switch 1, to be honest. Like, if you were playing Breath of the Wild on your Switch 1, I feel like that'd probably last you for, close to 3 hours. With the Switch 2, I feel like you're going to get about 2 hours. That's kind of been my experience. It seems to be. Maybe it's more than that. I've not set an exact timer, but it's not a crazy lot, So yeah, I went on a family vacation shortly, after the like within a week of the Switch 2 coming out, and so of course I took my Switch 2 on the trip to play on the ride down there, as well as like a little bit in the condo that we were staying in, like the Airbnb or whatever. And yeah, on a lengthy trip like that, when you're traveling several states, from Kentucky to Florida, it's a pretty good little drive. So you want to have a system that can stay charged for at least a pretty decent amount of that time. And yeah, it definitely was inconvenient the amount of times that the low battery light came on. And just the other day, I was playing it in handheld mode. This might be a little bit TMI. I don't know if I should go into all this, but I'll play my Switch 2 when I'm if I gotta go potty, when I'm going number two. And I've been known to, admittedly, be a bit of a long pooper. I might be on the can for a little bit. Maybe it's not unheard of for me to be on the toilet for maybe 20 minutes. So I took my Switch 2 in there, and I had maybe like 18% battery going in, and I was playing like Fantasy Life, which I feel like it's kind of got an open world-ish component to it, but I feel like it shouldn't be that graphically intensive, like it's not on the same scale as like, it's not got like all these really detailed, realistic models. Like there's quite a few textures that are a little bit low res and stuff. You've got kind of chibi characters, so it's not like a game that strives for like realism and isn't necessarily like pushing the envelope on a technical level. But yeah, I think I was at about 18% when I went into the bathroom, and yeah, I think I had to stop playing because I think it actually did go down to like 1% and was like gonna shut down on me. So I had to quit playing and wipe my butt. That's TMI. I don't know if I should even leave this in here, but that can maybe give you an idea. So, if I was on the toilet for like 20-ish minutes going into the bathroom at 18%, you're talking maybe about 1% a minute or something like that. That might not be perfect science, but just to kind of get an idea. So I don't know, fully charged 100%, that would be 100 minutes, so like an hour and 40 minutes. Honestly, that probably sounds about right to me. And your mileage may vary. And again, I've not got it down to an exact science. The battery might not be as bad as I'm making it out to be, but I feel like a lot of people have been saying, 2 hours or so. In my experience, I feel like that might honestly be a little bit of a stretch. I don't know if it quite even hits that for the average game. Now, if you're playing like Mario 3 on the NES app or something, then you'll probably get a lot more out of it. Also, I don't like keep my brightness all the way up. That's at like maybe mid level brightness, maybe even a little bit lower than mid, and just kind of average volume. Because of course that'll drain it faster. But yeah, that's kind of been my experience. That's pretty much all the negatives that I have to say about the actual hardware itself. So now let's actually talk about the positive. Maybe I should have started with the positives because it sounds like I'm really like hammering on the Switch 2, but there is a lot to like about the system. Um, so obviously, you've got the improved graphical capabilities, and that's one where honestly, that's kind of one of those things where I was talking about where I feel like I've really not had the chance to see this baby at its full capacity, because like for me personally, I'm not really interested in like Cyberpunk, for example. That's a very realistic, graphically intensive, large open world game with like detailed environments and stuff, and I don't know, ray tracing and all that crap probably. So I don't really have that frame of reference there. Probably the most graphically intensive games that I have played on it, and I've really not played either of them that much. But I did purchase Split Fiction by the makers of It Takes Two because I really like It Takes Two. And, so this is another, solid co-op game. That's kind of why I've not played it that much, though, because I have to have somebody else to play it with me, which isn't always necessarily convenient. But from what I have played of it, the graphics do look very good. It's a pretty graphically intensive game that does go for realism quite a bit. And you're playing the whole thing split screen, so it's got to render everything twice. And, yeah, I've got a video of it up on the channel. I don't think the video's in 4K because my capture card says 4K. It's supposed to be able to record in 4K, but the highest I can figure out to get it to record in is like 1440p, which I kind of thought was 4K, but I looked it up and like, no, that's kind of between 1080 and 4K. 4K is actually like 2 something. I don't know if it's like 2150p. I don't know. But I've not been recording in 4K, so sorry. And that video, I might have accidentally recorded it in 1080p, to be honest. But either way, though, so it looks clearer than it does in the video even. It's, as far as I know, runs in 4K. Didn't notice any, like, visible pixels or anything. So, yeah, I mean, as far as I can tell, I don't really see any... I can't imagine there being any compromises. I can't imagine the PS5 version looking better than that, or the the Xbox version looking better. Again, I've only played that game for a limited amount of time, but when I did play, it did look very good. Similarly, I only played this game for about an hour, and that was to do a video on it. But I did purchase the $10 upgrade for Hogwarts Legacy to get the Switch 2 edition version, which looks much better. I feel like it's maybe not as optimized as it could have been, though, so I'm not going to necessarily hold that against the Switch 2. I kind of feel like maybe that upgrade does leave a little bit to be desired. And you can correct me, because like I played Hogwarts Legacy on the Switch 1 some time ago. It was like over a year ago. And that's my only frame of reference. It looks way better than the Switch 1 version, I'll say that. But let me know in the comments on the PlayStation, on the PS5 version. So it really annoyed me on Switch 1 where, it's this open world game. You can explore all the different rooms in Hogwarts Castle. There's like probably, 100 plus rooms that you can go into and explore and stuff. But before almost every room, you'd go up to the door and you would see like a little spinny circle on the screen because it would have to load on Switch. And it might take a good 5 seconds or so to load before the door opens up and you can actually go through it. Like every time you go to a door. So even if it's just a few seconds, that starts to really add up over time. And I was under the impression that that wasn't a thing on like PS5, for example, that you just, you go from door to door seamlessly and there's no loading in between, like loading up each individual room. It's definitely way, way better. You don't have to wait nearly as long. But on Switch 2, there is still a little bit of loading, like going from room to room in Hogwarts Castle, which was a little bit jarring to me because I thought that was just going to be completely done away with. Because obviously they got rid of like on Switch One, and I know this wasn't a thing on PlayStation, but on Switch One, when you're exploring the open world, you can't just freely walk into it's not Diagon Alley, Hogsmeade, like the little market town place where you can like buy stuff from the stores. You would have to. There was like an invisible wall. There was like a force field around it, and you would have to select that you wanted to go inside, and then it would have to load for probably like 30 plus seconds. They got rid of that, so the open world is seamless. There's no having to load to get into Hogsmeade or like any other town in the game. You just walk up to it and you go inside. I was gonna say you just fly into it, but they do still make you dismount from your broom for whatever reason. You can't ride your broom into Hogsmeade, but you can just walk right in. It's seamless. So yeah, that kind of surprised me that it's not seamless to go from door to door inside of Hogwarts Castle. So let me know if that's an issue on PlayStation, because I did not think it would be. And I don't like the fact, even if it's not long, if it's maybe like a second each time, that just kind of breaks the immersion a little bit. And again, if it does it for like, maybe not necessarily every door, but the majority of doors that you go into, you see that little circle over them for a second while it's loading up before you can actually open the door and go inside. I'd expect a little bit more from a current gen console. And again, the graphics of Hogwarts Legacy do look a lot better compared to Switch 1. Just like higher resolution textures and models and stuff like that. Although I will say, like, the character models and stuff already looked really good on the Switch 1 version. But the environments, like the open world and stuff, not as great. Again, it's one of those things, though, where I still wouldn't say that it's like PS5 level. And again, I don't know if that comes down to optimization. Maybe the PS5 version isn't even like that groundbreakingly amazing. I don't know. But there were definitely some things, like, honestly, I don't really remember now, but like you can watch for yourself in that video that I put on the channel. I don't remember if it was that there was poppy in that you could kind of see off in the distance a fair amount of, or what it was. But there was definitely some things where I was like, I would kind of expect a little bit better from Switch 2 to not really be able to notice this pop in that's happening, or these other little things here and there, or maybe like that texture or that water effect seems a little bit iffy, So I don't know. Obviously, some companies' games are going to be better optimized than others. Maybe Warner Brothers was really kind of rushing to get a Hogwarts Legacy Switch 2 patch out there for launch day, and so maybe they didn't take as much time as they should have to really polish it up. Or maybe it's just the Switch 2 shortcomings. I really don't know. Time will tell. But from what I've heard, Cyberpunk apparently does look and run very good on Switch 2 and is like better than the Steam Deck version. Again, I've not played it for myself. I can't verify that. So I'm hoping that it is just kind of an optimization thing. Maybe it's something to do with the fact that the game, that Hogwarts Legacy, that they were going off the Switch 1 build and improving that versus like porting the other version that's on like PlayStation and stuff. If that makes sense, maybe that made things more complicated. I don't know. Although I kind of imagine that's not what they did. I kind of feel like maybe it's not based on the Switch 1 build, because it's not really just like a patch that you download. It's actually like a separate icon on your menu screen. So like once you download it and make sure you transfer all your save data, you can delete that original like 16, 20 gigabyte, however many gigabytes it was, Switch 1 version of Hogwarts Legacy, because otherwise that's just going to take up empty space, because it's like a separate 20-something gig download that has nothing to do with this other one, if that makes sense. So maybe it is closer to the PlayStation version. I don't know. But it did leave a little bit to be desired, but it is a significant upgrade for like $10, so I don't regret purchasing it. But yeah. Before we talk about Mario Kart, I guess there's a couple things we could still talk about with the Switch, the Switch 2. As far as how comfortable it is, like to hold the Joy-Cons, like say when you detach them, I will say, I had my gripes that I talked about with the ZL and ZR buttons, wishing that there was a little bit more space in between there, or like that you could push them down a little bit further because it feels like it doesn't always register it. But that said, I've not really played, you know, with the Joy Cons on their side, but I will say it does feel a lot better. Because obviously the system itself is bigger, so that means that these are also bigger, the Joy Cons, and yeah, I do really like the SL and SR buttons. You can see if it'll come into focus, are significantly bigger than they were on the Switch One, where it was like almost unusable. You kind of had to have the grip attached for them to be even remotely comfortable. I will say it is a little bit cumbersome. You can see kind of like with the extra distance, just like reaching that left analog stick, like with my thumb, you know. So it's not the most comfortable thing ever. It'd be kind of more comfortable if the analog stick was closer to the bottom. Then it would feel more like an actual controller. But then it probably wouldn't be as good if you're playing, you know, with them in the console itself. The magnet works really well. I've heard some people say like, "Oh, it's so much easier to attach and detach compared to the Switch One." I never had a problem, you know, with the with putting on or taking off the Switch One Joy Cons, where you just hit the button on the back and pull them straight up and then slide them in. So it's about the same difference, you know, but it is very satisfying to pull them off and reconnect them. I kind of hesitate to do it a whole lot because I worry a little bit about wearing it out, but that's probably not an issue. Because it does feel like a pretty sturdy magnet. There is a little bit of wiggle room because I kind of test that out because people I know talk about wanting it to have like a very solid feel to it. You can kind of wiggle it a little bit, almost like if you've got a tooth that's a little bit loose, you know. And I was a little bit like, I don't know about that. But apparently, I think they did like a developer interview, and I think they talked like I guess it's made that way deliberately, some way that makes it, I guess, where the shock impact, if you were to drop it or something, maybe it makes it less likely to break the little thing in there that you know, that makes the magnet work. So yeah, but it's definitely, I don't know if it feels quite as solid in the hands as I would like, but I mean, as long as it doesn't wear out over time and get looser, as could happen with the Switch One, which seemingly this one won't, then that is nice. But yeah, you can kind of see, you know, the little crevice, the little space in between where the Joy-Cons slide in and the screen itself. And again, it is just like, you have to kind of deliberately do it, but you know, if you try to, you can make the Joy-Cons kind of wobble. So it's maybe not as solid as I would have liked, but it's not bad. And something that I actually really, really like a lot that I've not heard anybody talk about, and you know, I've been thinking about maybe reaching out to like, I don't know, Game Explain or like some other outlet that's, you know, a more well established channel than mine, because if I did a video talking about it, I don't know if anybody's going to see it, but I think it needs to have more coverage. Maybe you could say it's a little bit of a placebo effect. I don't know. I've not tested it out with like hardcore science. That's also kind of why I want to leave it to somebody else, because I don't know if I want to do all that. But from my experience, one of the first things I wanted to do with my Switch 2 was put in a game like Mario Galaxy, you know, like Mario 3D All Stars. I put that in there because it's got Mario Galaxy on there, a game that relies very heavily on pointer controls, and just see if the gyro pointing controls was better and didn't drift as much as the Switch One Joy-Con. So I did that, and from my limited experience, I messed around. I played Mario Galaxy maybe for like 5 minutes, maybe less. It wasn't like a super long time. I might have recalibrated a couple times, and I was like deliberately trying to get it to desync, because that was the issue on Switch One. You would have to constantly press like the Y button or whatever button it was. Or if you're playing like Captain Toad Treasure Tracker or any game that has pointer controls, you were constantly having to recalibrate that thing. Like I did a playthrough several months back on the channel, probably close to a year ago at this point, of Super Mario Galaxy, and it was obviously the Switch 1 version because the Switch 2 hadn't come out yet. And like I remember when I played Mario Galaxy on the Switch 1, having to recalibrate constantly, like every few seconds, my cursor would like drift, you know, and I'd have to press the button to resync it, and then like after a while it would start drifting again after a few seconds. But again, I hardly had to recalibrate it on Switch 2. It was a very minimal amount of time. And the reason I did have to recalibrate it was, again, I was deliberately trying to do stuff to like F it up, like pointing it in weird places. So seemingly from what I can tell, because I was a little disappointed when they first announced the Switch 2 and it didn't have. What I was really hoping was just to kind of future proof the console should they ever bring, like, say, Wii games to NSO. Um, I was hoping that what they could do is they could make it a little bit more like a Wii remote. And, because on the Switch 1, on this right Joy-Con on the bottom, there was an IR sensor that like never got used hardly, except for a couple of games. I thought, what if they put that on the top? Maybe put like a little tiny IR camera. Yeah, I guess it's a camera, not a sensor. Like a tiny IR camera between the R and ZR buttons or something. And then you could point that, and the dock could have like a built-in sensor bar or like a built-in IR sensor to where, because like you're going to have your dock in front of your TV anyway, because that's how you connect the dock to the TV. And that way, when you point your Joy-Con at it, it's literally just like your sensor bar that you had sitting, in front of the TV on the Wii back in the day. But they didn't do that, and I was a little bit upset because it's like, oh, I guess the gyro is still probably going to drift like it did in the Switch 1. Unless, the only thing that would make me happy about them not having IR is if they somehow improve the gyro. And from what I can tell, it seems like they did. Now, again, take that with a grain of salt because I'm no expert. I only tested it with the one game. And part of me is like, well, maybe it's a little bit of a placebo. But, like, no, I definitely distinctly remember probably hundreds of times playing Mario Galaxy and having to just keep recalibrating it. And when I was testing it on Switch 2, I wasn't... Like on Switch 2, they added it, like, since the Joy-Con, or Switch 1 even, in Mario 3D All-Stars, where the Joy-Cons have more buttons than the Wii Remote and Nunchuck. Like, you can press a button, for example, to make Mario do a spin, and you don't have to, like, shake it. And that was kind of good, because that helped it from, not desyncing as much. Because, if you're pointing to pick up star bits, and then you've got to, like, shake the controller, then that's going to throw off your cursor, and you're going to have to recalibrate. But on Switch 2, I was even doing that. Like, I wasn't pressing the button to make Mario spin, to make him do his little yahoo, to get extra airtime or whatever. I would be pointing, getting my star bits, and then I would shake it, and then I'd go back to pointing. And, like, 9 out of 10 times, like, I didn't need to recalibrate after doing that, which is, like, miles better than it was on Switch 1. So, again, I'm thinking about maybe, like, messaging some big YouTuber, Nintendo YouTuber on Twitter and being like, hey, I think you could make a video of this. This is something I noticed. Because I don't really want to put in the hard work to do it. But if you want to give me a shout out and you do it and get a bunch of views on it and other outlets cover it, because I've not heard anybody talk about that. But for me, that's a very big deal, and I'm very happy about that. Because, again, future-proofing, if they ever do bring Wii games to Switch Online like they're doing GameCube now, they might actually work pretty darn good. So that's very nice. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else to talk about. I mean, like, it is nice. They've got the USB-C port on the top and on the bottom. So charging, you don't have that cord coming down from the bottom part, which kind of gets in your way if you're playing in handheld mode. Which is very good considering this thing has worse battery. You're going to be more likely to play this while it charges versus the Switch 1. But I mean, there's really not a whole lot else to say about that. I can't really speak on the camera or the game chat feature because I've not used it. So I'd like to in time. It seems like a really cool feature. I just don't really have anybody to do it with. I don't really have any like good friends that have a Switch 2 that I can hit up and be like, hey, let's play Switch 2 online together and chat with the camera. I've not bought one of the cameras for it because it's like $50. But from what I've heard, like pretty much any camera, if it has like a USB-C, will work on it. So apparently, from what I've heard, even like the camera that I'm using to record this video, because it's a wired camera, a webcam that just plugs into my laptop that I have here in front of me, and that's how I'm recording this video feed, because my laptop doesn't have like a built-in camera lens or anything. Apparently, I can unplug that from the laptop, stick it right um, in my Switch dock, and use that as a camera. Again, though, going back to what I said earlier, if you're playing GameCube online with your friends, and like let's say I did end up buying one of the wireless GameCube controllers, but like let's say you're using the other thing like they had on the Switch One, where you can use your old wired GameCube controllers by plugging them into the adapter. And I know this is like very specific circumstance, but still, you know, you wouldn't be able to play GameCube games online with somebody while seeing their face through the webcam and also while having your wired GameCube controllers plugged in, because that would use 3 USB ports and the Switch 2 dock only has 2. I don't know if anybody's going to run into that issue because, again, that's a very specific circumstance, but I'm just saying, again, it would have been nice if there was more USB ports on it because, again, the GameCube thing takes 2 in and of itself. That uses up all of them just to have like your wired GameCube controllers to plug in. Um, but yeah, I guess pretty much the last thing about the Switch 2, and you could argue it's not really hardware, this is more of a software thing, but it is a feature exclusive to the Switch 2, and that's GameCube NSO. So, at launch they only had Wind Waker, F-Zero GX, and was it Soul Calibur 2? Is that the name of it? Whatever that fighting game is that has Link in it, that's the only reason I know about that game. Like, I don't know what Soul Calibur is. The only reason I know that franchise exists is because people were like, oh, remember the GameCube one? That had Link in it. That was cool. That's the only reason I know what Soul Calibur is, but it's on here. Um, I've been playing on the channel. I've been playing through Wind Waker. They also added, like, just recently, like about a month after the console's release. So maybe we're going to get a GameCube game roughly every month. I don't know. But they did recently add Mario Strikers as well. So there's currently 4 games on the platform, 3 of which I've hardly touched. I'm kind of curious about F-Zero GX, but I don't have a strong desire to play it right now because there's already like Mario Kart, that's giving me my racing fix. So, maybe eventually I'll dip into that game because I hear it's like the best F-Zero game, by a lot of people. I'm not necessarily the biggest like F-Zero guy. It's never really grabbed me. Maybe GX will be the one to do it. I don't know. And then I don't really have an interest in like Soul Calibur. I'm not much of a fighting game guy. If I am, it's going to be like a platform fighter, like Smash Brothers, or like Nick All Star Brawl or something like that. Or even, I'm not the biggest fan of like Street Fighter or like Mortal Kombat. But even those games, I feel like there's a lot more like maneuverability and like you can move more quickly and jump around and stuff. Whereas these like 3D ones like Tekken and Soul Calibur, again, I've never played them. But it just seems so like kind of slower paced, or like was it Virtua Fighter? They just seem not that fun to me. The ones that are like pseudo 3D and like the camera rotates around you and it just feels like you move kind of slow. And I don't think I'd really be into that. So I don't really see me getting into Soul Calibur. And Mario Strikers maybe I could get into. That's always been probably like my least favorite of the Mario sports series. I love Mario Golf and Mario Tennis. I'll be really glad when those games come to the GameCube Switch Online platform. I'll be really curious to try the GBA ones too if they ever put those on Switch Online. I'm sure they will eventually. I did have, I think it was called Mario Golf or Mario Tennis Power Tour, I think was the Game Boy Advance one, and I used to play it some as a kid a little bit, but I lost it. So I've not played that game in over like, gosh, I don't know. Probably 18 years or more. So that'll probably be an extremely nostalgic game because I hardly remember it at all. And I'm sure once I boot it in, it'll probably, or once they add it and I play it, it'll probably come back to me and be like, oh yeah, I remember this music now. I never played Mario Golf Advance Tour though. But I did really like the console GameCube Mario Golf and Mario Tennis games, so I hope they put those on the platform sooner rather than later. My brother's not a very big gamer. He's probably going to get my nephew Cooper a Switch 2 for Christmas, and if he does, because like he's really into like golf, like in real life and stuff, and we used to play like Mario Golf Toadstool Tour on the GameCube together. So that'd be something fun that me and my brother could play online if they ever put that on there. But yeah, Mario Strikers, maybe if I played it more, I could get into it. That game, when it came to the platform, it did kind of bring to light a big issue with the GameCube NSO emulation. And it is one that I already noticed myself when I started my Wind Waker playthrough. I said it in the first episode when I first started like rolling as Link. When I first pressed A to make Link roll, and there was kind of a decent amount of input lag there. Yeah, there's some pretty bad delay, and I got used to it with Wind Waker. It's really not even much of an issue for me now. But like I dipped into Mario Strikers to check it out for a few minutes when they added it. And when you're doing, I don't know what it's called, but like your super like charge shot move, like this special move you do, where there's like this meter, and you've got to press the button. Like it goes very quickly, like it's a very zippy meter, and you got to press it at a certain spot this way, and then it goes the other way, and you press it at a certain spot that way. And the input delay makes it like pretty much impossible to nail that, which is really annoying. I don't know how long the input lag is. I would say I'm by no means an expert. I'm not one who like meticulously counts individual frames or anything, but I'd say it's probably like maybe a half a second delay, which is pretty significant. I was just talking about Mario Golf. That game is all like filling up meters to time your shots and stuff. So you know, that could be a big issue if they do add that, if there's significant delay with that as well. So I hope they fix it. I think for some single player games, again, like Wind Waker and stuff, it might be a little jarring at first, but you can get used to it. You can adapt. But for like competitive multiplayer games, that require like timing and precision, that's kind of going to be a problem, especially if they ever put like Smash Brothers Melee on there. That game has such a strong appeal to like, tournament level players, like professional people and not just casuals. That would be pretty bad, I think, if they put Melee on there and there's significant delays. I think Nintendo really it would be ill-advised for Nintendo to do that. Because I think once they put Melee on there, I think that could be a big selling point, honestly. I could see people, that being like the decision maker of like, okay, I was holding off on buying a Switch 2, but this old game from 25 years ago that they brought back that I can play on Switch Online, now I'm going to buy it. Because I think there's an audience of people who like Melee that much, including like maybe some lapsed Nintendo fans who maybe haven't really played Nintendo since GameCube, because then they started playing Xbox or PlayStation or something. I think if you put Smash Brothers Melee on Switch Online, that's going to get in a lot of people. And now they can play it online with their friends from like around the world or something, who aren't living close by, and they can relive their childhood days playing Melee, and they can take it on the go. But there needs to not be any significant input lag. Maybe it'll never be perfect one-to-one with like, obviously the pro players like to play, especially on like a CRT and with like the wired controllers and stuff. Maybe you're never going to get it to that point where there's absolutely zero latency. But I think it needs to be a lot less than like half a second or whatever it is now, because it ain't great. If they can get it down to like 0.1 second delay, so I don't know, but hopefully Nintendo will work on that. I think, the Nintendo 64 Switch Online app, I know when it launched, there were some emulation issues. I don't know if latency was one of them or not, but I know like there was issues with like, I don't know, like certain graphics and like, fog effects not displaying correctly, or like certain like textures or like reflections. I think there was an issue with like Toon Link and like not Toon Link, but Shadow Link and the Water Temple. And Nintendo went back and they fixed a lot of those issues, if not all of them. So I'm hoping that over time that the latency issues will, not be as much of an issue. But yeah. And something else, it's also like super, super nice. I really, love the fact that so many Switch 1 games just automatically look and run better on the Switch 2. I think that's great. A lot of them don't even require a patch or anything. I've tested it out with a handful of games. Some of them look and play better than others. There's some games like, and I don't know if they ever would, because it's kind of an old game at this point. It came out in 2020, and it's also like, Nickelodeon's probably not going to care enough to give THQ the time and means to do that. But I would love if they had like an official Switch 2 patch or edition of SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom rehydrated. That was one of my favorite games on the GameCube. I love that game. The remake looks so gorgeous on PlayStation. On Switch, a lot of pop in, particularly that very first level, Jellyfish Fields, which on other platforms is maybe the prettiest looking level in the game, but on Switch 2 or on Switch 1, there's just like so many, because like there's so many individually rendered like pieces of, I guess, like kelp. It's not grass because it's SpongeBob, they're underwater. And the Switch 1 just can't handle that, so there's like constant pop in. You can see just like trees and signs, and it's just like the level, you can see it loading in front of you one step at a time. um, does not look good, that first level in particular, on Switch 1. And playing it on Switch 2, however they made the game, it doesn't automatically improve that on better hardware. Some game like Spyro actually does. I tested it out a little bit, and it's pretty freaking impressive. That's another game that I absolutely adore, because there was like some frame rate jittery issues that I really did not like on Switch 1. It was still playable. You could kind of get used to it. But it was kind of a big problem where the game, it would be going smoothly, then like hitch, then smoothly hitch. It was like maybe 1 second every like minute or something. The frame would just dip to zero for like a second, and then it's like, okay, back to normal. It was very jarring. Ukulele had a similar issue on Switch 1. But that's gone on the Switch 2 version, so I'm happy about that. But Battle for Bikini Bottom, it still has the pop in. It doesn't have the frame rate issues anymore, though. I did test out Sand Mountain, and because that level, you're going down slopes, and there's all these tiki boxes you can break, and then you get all these, like, hundreds of what the game calls shiny objects that you're collecting at a time. And yeah, the Switch 1 version, it would start chugging. Like, it would turn into a slideshow at that part. That's not a thing on Switch 2 anymore. So the game runs fine now. Just like Spyro runs fine. But, the resolution is still pretty low. Although I will say the textures are a lot better, seemingly. Like Signs, where I remember Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated on Switch 1, there would be a lot of signs that would just, like, you couldn't even really read it. It was so muddy, so blurry, so low resolution. The texture's looking like worse than a Nintendo 64 texture, where it's like this sign for Kelpo in this Kelpo advertisement on a billboard in the downtown Bikini Bottom level, and it's like you can't even really fully make out what it says on Switch 1. But those are legible now. It's not like a weird pop-in thing like it was before, where sometimes like it would just take a few seconds to load in the higher resolution texture. But yeah, overall the game, it still looks pretty jagged. The pixels, like stuff off in the distance, low resolution, and stuff. So I hope they update that. I hope they update like the Crash Insane trilogy to make it look better, taking advantage of the new hardware. I know they did, I guess, like patch it to where it runs at all on Switch 2, because for whatever reason I think that was a game that like couldn't run at first. But they did some tweaking, and so now it does work perfectly fine, from my understanding, on Switch 2. But yeah, there's a good number of games that I would like to see developers go back and update to make it look and play a little better. Hat in Time is another one I tested out because I love that game, but it had some very rough performance issues on Switch 1 where it would just kind of randomly freeze up. Like it would lag pretty badly at points. And I tested it out, and it seems some better, but there is still lag. I don't know if the developers behind that team, it's kind of a small indie studio, Gears for Breakfast. I don't know if they have any interest or even like the manpower or whatever to go back and make a Switch 2 specific version. But I would love it if they did, though, because I really love Hat in Time. And, as with all these other games like Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, some of these others, like, I did double dip and get on PlayStation just because they look and play so much better. But I would vastly prefer, because like I'm always going to be a Nintendo gamer at heart, so I'd love to have them all on a Nintendo platform. But beyond that, even more importantly than my bias for Nintendo, is the fact that unlike on PlayStation, I can actually play these games portably on the go. And the only way I could do that on PlayStation is if I invest in a PS Portal, which is like a couple $100, and you can't even play those games like in the car or anything, or on like a flight, because you need Wi-Fi. because you're just streaming the game. You're not, so if you're playing it in a hotel or something with spotty Wi-Fi, then like you're not going to be able to play it, which sucks. So just having a native handheld version that I can also play on the TV of those games, that's like the definitive version that looks great, plays great, no compromises, would be great. So it's really nice to see the games that do have native upgrades, and I've been wanting to test out more. I played a little bit of Breath of the Wild. I did a video of that on the channel, but it really wasn't enough to give me a super good look, because I started a new file, so I just messed around on the Great Plateau a little. I didn't actually like go into the Korok Forest or anything like that. But yeah, it was. I definitely could tell that like the resolution was better, that you could see stuff looking clearer off in the distance. But yeah, I really want to like at some point really dive in on some of those other games, like the first party Nintendo games, and see how much better they do look and play, like in say Korok Forest, where you've got all that dense foliage and stuff. To do that at 60 frames with no drops, and it looking clearer, I'm sure is great. And like I've not tested out Mario Odyssey yet. I'd intended to at this point, because I really wanted to play Mario Odyssey on the channel. I've been meaning to for a while, and I thought this would be a really good opportunity to start my playthrough. That way I could experience the better graphics. And that's part of why I've held off on making this video, because that was one of the things, testing out Odyssey to see how much better it looked in 4K is one of the things that I wanted to do before making this video. But I've just not got around to it yet, because we're playing through Wind Waker. Now Donkey Kong Bonanza is about to come out, so I really don't have time. But yeah, I do like how all these games are getting improvements, and I really hope over time that a lot of these third-party companies, maybe they have zero interest in that, I don't know. But I would really love if a lot of these companies, Activision and like Microsoft, because like that's a game I never picked up, like Grounded. Looked really interesting to me, that Xbox game Grounded, and they ported that to Switch. But the Switch 1 version looks pretty bad graphics wise. It definitely feels not just last gen compared to the Xbox version, but last gen maybe. So if they get a version of that, which I know they're coming out with like a Grounded 2 now, but still, if they went back and updated the first one, that would be really cool. And there's some other games I can think of here and there that's like, well, this would be really great if they did a Switch 2 update. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, I'm very happy so far with the games that do look and run better. And I'm happy with I think they've got some work to go with like the latency, but I am enjoying the GameCube Switch Online. The wireless GameCube controller, which I've got off camera. I'm not going to bother to reach for it because it's a little bit out of the way. But it looks and feels just like an actual GameCube controller. Wind Waker, I'm really enjoying. See, that's the thing too, again, where I've talked about, I think I've not felt the full potential of this console. It's because we know that there's going to be so many more GameCube games coming. Right now, there's only a few. So I can't say that I'm like blown away by having GameCube games on NSO just yet, because I've mainly just been playing Wind Waker. I've not really been that interested in going back and playing Mario Strikers or F-Zero or Soul Calibur. I almost said Dark Souls. I knew it had the word soul in there somewhere. So I've only been playing Wind Waker, and even that, for the most part, I've only really been playing it docked on the TV because I've been capturing footage, so I've not really got to experience GameCube games on the go, taking them, playing them wherever I want, because I've been making videos on it. I'm really excited for the future of Switch 2. I know I listed a lot of negatives there at the start in the first like 20 minutes. But there are things that are definite improvements. I think something I didn't point out, where the system is bigger, I do feel like the face buttons and the analog sticks are a little bit bigger, so I definitely prefer those. I think they feel pretty nice. I'm looking to see if there's anything else that I want to talk about on this system. I think that's pretty much it. I've not really had any issues really with like overheating and stuff. I feel like the fans do a pretty good job keeping it well ventilated, whether it's in the dock or not. Um, so there's that. There's really not a whole lot of changes to the user interface. It looks close to identical to the Switch One in terms of like the icons and stuff. Um, it's fine. That's kind of the thing with the Switch Two, where it's like the system is very iterative of the Switch One. So I don't really feel like it's not as wowing as like when the going from the Wii U to when the Switch first came out, because it was just a whole different way to play. It was so mind blowing. Like you can play these games docked on the TV, or you can take them on the go. Um, I think this is going to be an amazing console in the long term, but right now I'm just, you know, it's a delayed gratification sort of thing. It's not that instant gratification right out the box, because it plays all the same games that were on the Switch One, plus the new games, obviously the new Mario Kart. But again, that game's not really wowed me. And at this point, I've talked enough about the Switch One hardware. I think that's going to be maybe next week's podcast. I don't know. Which then Donkey Kong will be out. So I don't know, but we won't be doing that in this one because this is already over an hour. Um, but but yeah, gosh, I lost my train of thought now. What was I talking about? After I said that about we won't be talking about Mario Kart, and then I started thinking about Donkey Kong, and I was like, wait, what was I talking about? Um, but yeah, it's the Switch 2, and I mean that's what I wanted from the Switch 2. I didn't want Nintendo to reinvent the wheel necessarily. I'm very very happy. I was like so relieved and so overjoyed when they announced that the Switch 2, when they first said, whenever it was, I think they just like tweeted it out, like Nintendo President Furukawa, that the Switch 2 would be backwards compatible with Switch 1 games fully. With, I mean, a minor caveat there for stuff like Labo, but that's kind of to be expected. But I was so glad because the Switch 1 has, in my opinion, the greatest software library of any console ever in terms of not just first party, but also third party games. Just some dream ports and remakes that I never would have expected to come back, like Battle for Bikini Bottom, Spyro, the Reignited trilogy, the Crash Bandicoot Insane trilogy. All these games, like all of my favorite games from my childhood, regardless of what I played them on, whether I played it on a Nintendo platform or whether it was a PlayStation game or something else. Um, I have that on my Switch One. Um, Not every single game that I ever played and loved, but like 95% of them, some very obscure stuff, like Ty the Tasmanian Tiger. I was always like, boy, I'd love if that came back, but there's not enough demand for that. Ty the Tasmanian Tiger, that's such an obscure thing. They'll never bring that back. They brought that back on the Switch One. Katamari Damacy, I didn't think there was enough demand for that. They put that on Switch One. So I'm so happy that the games carry over. I'm so happy Nintendo didn't reinvent the wheel. That my Switch 1 cartridges still work, that there's not some crazy weird new gimmick that they shoehorned in there. It does everything the Switch 1 can do and more. And at the end of the day, that does make it kind of a little bit, I don't want to say underwhelming, but a little bit less exciting out of the box because it's kind of a known quantity. You know what you're getting. There's nothing really that's going to immediately wow you necessarily. But that's okay because, again, in the long term, I think looking back on the Switch 2, it's probably going to have an incredible library and end up being, one of Nintendo's best consoles. Maybe the best. It'll be hard to surpass the Switch 1, but we'll see. But yeah, I think that touches on most things. One last thing I did definitely want to talk about is recently I did finally have the opportunity to go out and get myself a Switch 2 Pro controller. This was another thing that did kind of annoy me, that felt like a weird step backwards. Just another one of those little you got to be kidding me with the Switch 2. The main reason I bought this is because for whatever dumb reason, Switch 1 Pro controllers can't turn on the Switch 2. They're compatible. You can use your Switch 2 controller, but, I'm a lazy boy. And, apparently I'm willing to spend exorbitant amounts of money to maintain that laziness, because I really didn't want to have to like get up and go to the dock and press the power button and go sit my butt back down and play with my Switch 1 Pro controller. I want to just be able to turn the console on just right there immediately. I'm hoping maybe in the future, maybe they can do a firmware update or something to address that, because I do think that's so stupid. Like, why do the Switch 1 controllers work perfectly fine on Switch 2 and you can sync them up and everything and connect them, but they can't turn the system on? That's so weird. So sometimes, a lot of times I'd have to get up, like I said, and turn it on the TV and then go sit my butt back down. Or other times, what I would do is use like the Joy Cons or like the Switch 2 GameCube controller I got, turn the system on that way, then go into the controller settings, disconnect that controller, and then turn on my Switch 1 Pro controller. So that was kind of the whole reason I got this, which was like, I don't know, $85, however much it is. And some people were talking about this being like maybe like their new favorite controller of all time. And I was like, okay, whatever. Because like looking at the pictures, it's like it's basically just a Switch 1 Pro controller, except it's like white on the back for whatever reason. And it's kind of like white under the analog sticks. You probably can't really see that very well. And, it's got, I guess, improved HD rumble. And, it's got the added C button for voice chat, and that's about it. Oh, and I guess it's got these extra two little back buttons that you can map to be whatever you want to be. If you want them to be extra trigger buttons or whatever you want them to be, which is a nice thing to have. A lot of the third-party controllers have that are like by companies like PowerA or Hori. Their controllers are like that. So it's kind of cool to see Nintendo embrace that in an official capacity. I don't know if I really see me using it, but it's nice that they're there. Well, I guess another thing that is kind of a big deal, I don't know how much I would be using it, but it does have a built-in headphone jack, which I don't think that the Switch 1 Pro controller did have. So that's nice, but on the whole, it was just kind of like, it seems like it's just going to be a Switch 1 Pro controller again. But actually holding it in my hands, I have to say, this is probably the most comfortable controller I've ever felt. Like you don't really get that impression just looking at the pictures of it, but it is so cozy in the hands. It's so snuggly. It's like a baby's bottom. It's so soft. It's so smooth. Something about, I don't know if you can hear the noise, but something about like just like pushing the analog stick to the side, like all the way to the end. It just feels so good. It's so, I don't know if it's just like the matte finish or whatever this material is, but it feels so soft and just so, it doesn't feel like clicky like other, but it melts in your hand. It's so cozy. It's like sex in your hands. Not that I would know, I'm a gamer, but from what I've heard, sex is like, it's like having that in your hand. No, but it genuinely, it feels so smooth, so comfortable. Which, to be fair, I've not used my Switch 1 Pro controller in a pretty long time because I've gotten a lot of like third-party ones that have like cool like designs on them. Like I've got one that's like it's officially licensed. It's third-party, but it's got like Link on it. It's like a Twilight Princess themed one, and I've got like different ones with like different Mario characters and stuff like that on it. So I mostly would use those, especially because for a long time I found it a while back, but there for like a year or so, I was actually missing my official like Switch 1 Pro controller. And that's part of why I bought some third-party ones. And the third-party ones aren't as comfortable as the Switch 1 Pro controller. But even so, I kind of went back to it and held it in my hands. Because like a lot of the third-party ones will have kind of like a weird... it's like there'll be like a line here that's really kind of uncomfortable that like makes your hand kind of raw and like irritated after a while. It's like there's a small gap where I guess there's like a frontal plate and a back plate. And this controller doesn't have that, so it's just smooth all the way around. You don't get that uncomfortable feeling. But I did go back, and the Switch 1 Pro controller doesn't have that either. So the Switch 1 Pro controller is more comfortable than those third-party ones. But even then, though, like it had this thing like where like there was like little like a bunch of little kind of microscopic holes in it and stuff to kind of make, I guess, for a better grip. Excuse me. This one doesn't have that. It's smoother, so I guess theoretically maybe it doesn't make for as good of a grip. Maybe you'd be more likely to drop this, or if your hands get real sweaty if you're playing a competitive game. I don't know. But I'm glad it doesn't have those little grippy things. I like how it's just so soft and smooth It feels so comfortable. I'm glad it's not like really rough and rigid, you know, which is kind of how I feel like most controllers are. This just I can't explain it. You really, I think, just have to hold one of these for yourself. But it is just, it's so. If you had a Wii U, you know how the discs were. If you remember, like just like the edges were rounded, like it wasn't like a normal disc. Like if you kind of put your hand on like the side of it, like where it goes around, it would just feel so smooth, and it just was so satisfying to just feel that. That's this whole controller. it just it feels so good. So I was kind of miffed at first about having to fork over like $85 to get one of these, but I gotta say it does feel great. I've really not had much of a chance to test out like because I've not had it long. I've just had this for like a few days, so I've not really tested out like how the HD rumble in it feels. That is something I should talk about, I guess, because I know they improved the HD rumble in the Joy Cons, which I am glad about. Um, but but yeah, I've not. It's kind of hard to say where it's kind of early on, but like I know in Fantasy Life uses it pretty well when you're doing like the crafting mini games, and it does feel really really good. So I'm excited to see games take advantage of the improved Rumble. I don't know if it's going to be on the level of like it's kind of in the infancy stages, right? There's not that many games that use, excuse me, the improved Rumble. But I don't think that it's going to be on the same level as like the PlayStation DualSense controller, which feels crazy. I was really hoping it would be more comparable to that, and maybe it still will be in time. They've just not had a good game to really take advantage of that. You know, I played a little bit of like the Nintendo Switch Welcome Tour, which has like the maracas and stuff, and I mean it felt pretty good, but you know, it wasn't like earth shattering. Like I feel like the Switch One Joy Cons probably still could have been capable of that. It didn't feel like that, like whoa, mind blowing, you know. So we'll see as I play more with it how it feels. So yeah, there's a lot of features I've not really had a chance to really make the fullest of yet in terms of just like playing games that are really graphically demanding, playing games that take advantage of the improved Rumble, playing online games with friends and being able to try out the voice chat features. So there's a lot of things I've just not been able to experience on this console yet. Um, but again, in time, I think it's really going to be something special. You know, so yeah, I don't think I have a whole lot else to say. I've got some mixed feelings, but overall, I'm feeling pretty positive about the Switch 2, mainly because of the future, not necessarily because of this past month I've had with it. Because again, and we'll talk about that again. It's going to be a separate podcast, I think, where we talk about like Mario Kart and I guess the other launch games I've been playing. I can go into detail about Fantasy Life because that's the majority of what I've been playing. I've put like gosh, I don't even. I think like 170 hours in Fantasy Life, which is crazy because I've only had that game for like a month. I didn't get that game when I first got the Switch 2. I got it like a week or so later, and I don't think I've ever put that many hours into a game in that short amount of time. I don't even think Breath of the Wild. But yeah, that game really got its hooks in me. I think I'm starting to get a little burnout on Fantasy Life, but man, while it lasted, that was a pretty good ride. So we'll maybe talk about that more in a future episode as well as Mario Kart and stuff. But yeah, I think that's going to be that for just me talking about the actual hardware itself. But yeah, thank you so very much for listening to this. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're not already, I'd greatly appreciate it if you were to subscribe to the channel for more podcasts. I want to get into the habit of doing these once a week, going up on Saturday, like every Saturday at noon, I think is what it says in my like profile banner. I've not necessarily been adhering very well to that. These have been coming out very sporadically. Sometimes I'll go 2, maybe 3 weeks without having one. So apologies, but I don't know. To me, I've kind of been prioritizing just getting my regular like Let's Play episodes out. And then, you know, if it lines up with my, you know, if I'm able to fit in a podcast as well, then I'll do it. But if I don't get one every week, I'm not necessarily as concerned about missing it as like just my regular uploads, I guess. And like I talked about, I went on vacation to the beach about a month ago, so I wasn't able to upload or record any videos during that time. And since then, I've just kind of really been playing catch up, so uploads have been a little bit less frequent here on the channel. But I think I'm starting to kind of get caught up and get back ahead again. So this video I'm recording days in advance should go live Saturday at noon, and all this week I've had videos Monday through Friday scheduled to go up, and then I've got a video recorded for this coming Monday and Tuesday, more of my Wind Waker playthrough. So I'll be recording more of that in the coming days and stuff. So I'm getting ahead again. But for a while, I was really having a hard time staying caught back up after the vacation. That kind of set things back. But yeah, hopefully uploads will start picking up again, and we can do more of these podcasts. So yeah, if you like this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing for more of these podcasts, as well as, again, playthroughs I do on the channel, other miscellaneous videos, or maybe I'll just do an off the cuff video where I talk about something for 20 or 30 minutes, like a new trailer that drops or something. Reaction videos, hopefully, Lord willing, I'll be able to react. If there's been rumors about possibly a direct happening sometime in the coming weeks, and I should be able to do a live reaction to that and upload it, and just other stuff in the future. Also, I really want to do more. I want to do more live streams. I've done like 2 that have both been Mario Kart 8. So yeah, I would really like to, before long, and maybe it's good that I didn't talk about Mario Kart World in this video, because that was another reason that I was kind of waiting on making this video, is because I've really not got to play Knockout Tour online. I've kind of been holding off on that because I wanted to do that in a live stream. So now maybe I've got time. I can do a live stream and do that, and then, maybe next week or another podcast I'd go more in depth about my thoughts on Mario Kart World. Because again, not extremely positive. Like, I like the game okay, but it ain't worth $80. It's not a great launch game. It's got a lot of shortcomings. It's not a great successor to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with the Booster Course Pass included either. But I feel like it's maybe not fully fair that I've not really seen and done everything the game has to offer, since I've not done that stream where I actually try out the Knockout Tour online. So this kind of gives me a buffer where I've got more time to do that now, since I didn't get to talk about it in this podcast. So yeah, look forward to hopefully more live streams in the future. I've been really itching to play Splatoon, especially since they did that update to Splatoon 3 for like the Switch 2 version, and added, I think, Urchin Underpass from the first game into this one, and they're coming out with that new Splatoon. I'm not the biggest Splatoon guy. I kind of suck at it, but I've not played it in a very long time, so I think it would be kind of fun to dip in. I'll probably title the stream like Aaron Sucks at Splatoon 3 Live. I even, like, months ago, I didn't know what I would use it for, but I made like a graphic of like an avatar of myself as like an inkling, so I'll be able to put that to good use for the thumbnail for that. So yeah, look forward to that in the future, and other things on the channel as well. Occasionally talking about animation. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff. I'm rambling at this point. This is the world's longest outro, but yeah, I'm excited for the future of this channel, and I hope you are too. Between podcasts, playthroughs, random miscellaneous discussion videos, reactions, live streams, you name it, we'll be doing it. So yeah, I'll catch you guys next time. Thank you so very much for watching. Bye bye.